What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through another player versus player comparison. So a couple weeks ago, I did my first type of this video, this offseason. I believe I compared Jahmyr Gibbs, Travis Etienne, and Najee Harris. If you guys didn't catch that video, basically what I do is that I take three players at the same position that are going in a similar ADP range. I break them down individually, and then I just give my opinion on what player I'd prefer in each scoring format. So PPR, half point PPR, and standard. And I am going to tell you guys which player I like, but I also think it's just important to kind of give you guys the information, because maybe you take the same information, you come to a different conclusion, but at some point in your fantasy drafts, you're probably going to be choosing between these three players. And the three players I'm going with today, we're going to go to the wide receiver position. These guys are going in the second round on most platforms. It's going to be A.J. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. According to the consensus ADP that I calculated using Sleeper, ESPN, and Yahoo, all three of these dudes are going somewhere in like the mid-second round area. So as you can see on the graphic here, CeeDee Lamb, his consensus ADP is 15.3. A.J. Brown is at 16.7, and Amon-Ra St. Brown is at 20.9. So you're going to be on the clock somewhere from, pick 12 to pick 20, and you may be looking for a stud wide receiver. You may not know which guy to go with. Hopefully this video can help you guys out. So right now, CeeDee Lamb is being drafted as the wide receiver 7, A.J. Brown is the wide receiver 8, and Amon-Ra St. Brown is the wide receiver 9. So let's talk about the most expensive guy here first. So CeeDee Lamb. He's coming off a breakout season where he finished as the wide receiver 7 in PPR points per game, and then the wide receiver 8 in both half-point PPR and standard scoring. He's only 24 years old, so this is a spot where I expect Lamb to stay in like the top 10 wide receiver range, but I also think he has the upside moving forward of being like a top 5 option at the position. I've talked about this a lot, but like Lamb didn't only have a breakout season in a year where like the Cowboys peaked. They, were the best offense in the NFL, and they kind of carried Lamb. That's not how the season played out. He put up those big numbers in a year where Dak Prescott missed 5 games. If we look back to like week 1, post-week 1, the Cowboys laid a clunker against the Buccaneers. Dak Prescott injured his finger, and I mean, people were panicking hardcore on CeeDee Lamb. They were selling him low. They were selling him at like a low-end wide receiver 2 price. And he weathered that storm. He played with the backup for 5 games. And then even when Dak returned, he really wasn't the same guy. He struggled, turned the ball over a ton. And this was also a season where the Cowboys kind of dropped pretty seriously in terms of their passing volume. So in CeeDee Lamb's first 2 seasons, 2020, 2021, the Cowboys averaged 40 pass attempts and 39 pass attempts per game. They were down to 33 last season. So really, in the grand scheme of things, nothing was going right for CeeDee Lamb, and he still made that jump from like a mid-tier wide receiver 2 in 2021 to a mid-tier wide receiver 1 last season in 2022. Also, when we're looking at the splits of when Dak was healthy versus when Dak was out, when Lamb was playing with Dak, he averaged 18.3 PPR points per game, so very strong. That's mid-tier wide receiver 1 production. But even without Dak, CeeDee Lamb still kind of weathered the storm, was at 16.5 points per game. So I think it's impressive to see that Lamb was able to kind of still be a wide receiver 1, even if it was a lower-end wide receiver 1 with a backup quarterback. But I also think those splits with Dak do have some room for improvement. I think Dak's going to play better this season. He's been a very solid quarterback throughout his career, even though he does have a lot of haters out there. So I think CeeDee Lamb is in a spot where he can comfortably kind of repeat where he was last season. But I still think as a young wide receiver, 24, I think he has room to grow. And I think at some point he will take that leap into high-end wide receiver 1 territory. Maybe it'll be this year, maybe it won't, but I do think that's kind of in his range of outcomes here. Now, the next wide receiver, A.J. Brown, he's a guy who thrived in his first season with the Eagles. A.J. Brown has always been a dude who's excelled in the efficiency department. He's been top 7 in yards per out run in all 4 of his NFL seasons, and that did not change last year. Second in yards per out run and yards per team pass attempt. He was fourth in yards per target, fifth in yards per reception, finished as the wide receiver 8 in PPR points per game, the wide receiver 7 in half-point PPR, and standard scoring. We also saw A.J. Brown have his highest target share and target volume of his career, 29% target share, 8.6 targets per game, and then he was also number 2 in touchdowns at the wide receiver position. So really impressive just all across the board. And I'm expecting, similar stuff out of A.J. Brown here in the 2023 season. Nothing really changed on this offense. I guess we're going to have Devonta Smith probably rising a little bit. They bring in DeAndre Swift as like a pass-catching back, but I'm not even convinced he's going to be used all that heavily. The one red flag, I don't even know if it's a red flag, but the one sort of issue I have with A.J. Brown here is that I just don't know how much room there is to grow up, right, from this production he saw last year. Like, this Eagles offense averaged the 10th fewest pass attempts per game, and they were middle of the pack with 25 passing touchdowns. Are we really expecting those numbers to change? Like, are we expecting this Eagles offense, who's been known to have a super strong run game, to just go out there, jack up the pass attempts? I personally am not expecting that. I also think that middle of the pack touchdown number is pretty fair, especially because when they're getting on the goal line, they're using the Jalen Hurts quarterback sneak where they just shove him into the end zone. So I don't know if we should be expecting significant improvement in these areas. And then if you're looking at A.J. Brown's production, if the Eagles aren't passing more or passing for more touchdowns, where's he going to take that leap from? Because he already excelled in the efficiency department. He scored crazy touchdown numbers, right? 11 out of 25 touchdowns. That's very strong. And he commanded a very high target share. So that's where I feel like his ceiling may be a little bit capped. But let me know what you guys think, because I know some people are very, very in on A.J. Brown, but those are kind of my thoughts there for him. And then my final wide receiver here is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he followed up his crazy ending to his rookie season with a fantastic year 2. I feel like people didn't really know if that 6-game stretch to end 2021 was legit. Clearly it was, because he came out a great season, wide receiver 10 in points per game last year, wide receiver 10 in PPR and standard scoring, and then the wide receiver 9 in half-point points per game, half-point PPR. And then unlike A.J. Brown and CeeDee Lamb, I feel like this is the thing where Amon-Ra gets pushed, a little bit below these guys in terms of ADP. But Amon-Ra got hit with one of those unlucky seasons where he left 3 different games with injury. Sometimes that happens. It's unfortunate, but he left early in week 3 with an ankle injury. He re-aggravated it in week 5, and then he also left week 7 early with a concussion. And so I know some people don't really like to remove those games from his production, but the way that I look at it is that, do you think Amon-Ra is an injury-prone player? Do we think Amon-Ra is more likely to get injured than an A.J. Brown or a CeeDee Lamb? Personally, I don't think so. I think he just got unlucky. It happens. We see it year after year. So that's why I'm willing to take those out, because I think next year the same thing could happen to A.J. Brown. The same thing could happen to CeeDee Lamb. We want to focus on these guys' production when they are healthy. And then I think the injury risk is a separate thing that we need to factor in. So if we take out those 3 games where Amon-Ra left early with injury, he averaged 19 PPR points per game. That would have been the wide receiver 7, just behind Davante Adams and Stephon Diggs, right there in PPR scoring behind Davante and Diggs. I think this Lions offense is ascending. I think they're going to be better here in 2023. There's also still very limited target competition for Amon-Ra. Jamison Williams is probably his biggest threat at this point, and he didn't really show anything as a rookie, and he's starting off the season suspended. Amon-Ra has already shown he's a stud, elite wide receiver 1, so I'm not really worried, about the competition department. And like I said, he's not even 24 years old yet. I would not be surprised if he took another leap here in year 3. He's not done improving as a player, so I do really like Amon-Ra heading into this season. Now let's look at who I would prefer at this spot. So I think looking at scoring formats, PPR, half-point PPR, standard, I feel like those play a larger role when looking at running backs, but I do think it still has some variance at the wide receiver position. If you have a super volume heavy guy, obviously they're going to be kind of dinged when it comes to standard scoring, and then vice versa if a guy doesn't have a ton of volume for PPR. But looking at PPR and half point PPR scoring, I'm honestly pretty firmly going with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think all three of these wide receivers are in the same area, but I do prefer Amon-Ra. I believe I have him ranked as my wide receiver 6, which is much higher than consensus. When we're looking at his healthy games, he just straight up outproduced both CeeDee Lamb and A.J. Brown, and that was while also underperforming in the touchdown department. 6 touchdowns in 16 games, so he didn't hit big with the touchdowns, and he still outproduced these guys. I think he's going to take a step forward as a player. Hasn't turned 24 years old. He is still improving. And I kind of feel like Amon-Ra is in this spot where if he was like one of the top prospects heading into the NFL draft, if he was picked in the first round, I feel like everyone would just be going crazy about his production. But I feel like since he was a day 3 guy, it kind of slides under the radar a little bit. Maybe it's like people aren't really expecting it, or they still are doubting him a little bit. I don't know what it is, but I feel like if he had that hype coming into the NFL, people would be going crazy and he would be drafted higher. Then looking at the other wide receivers, if I had to choose between CeeDee Lamb and A.J. Brown for PPR and half-point PPR, I would honestly take Lamb over A.J. Brown. I do think A.J. Brown is going to be a mid-tier wide receiver 1, but I just see much clearer paths for both Amon-Ra and Lamb to break into that high-end wide receiver 1 territory. I really like to shoot for upside, and so if I'm drafting someone as the wide receiver 7 or the wide receiver 8, it's cool if they finish as the wide receiver 7 or the wide receiver 8, but I want to see that upside for them to be a top 5, even a top 3 option at the position. I just think that path is more there for an Amon-Ra or a CeeDee Lamb. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong in the comment section. Like, if you guys do think A.J. Brown has that upside, like, I'll definitely hear the take. I know on Underdog, I think he's like a top 10 pick, so people really love him on Underdog. I think he goes right behind Stephon Diggs. I just can't get there, but, let me know down below in the comment section. Now, when we look at standard scoring, I do think it's a little bit more interesting. I don't think it's as clear-cut for me because it obviously is going to favor efficiency, touchdowns, and, A.J. Brown kind of thrives there, and it's going to remove the volume of a CeeDee Lamb or an Amon-Ra. But I also don't think it's unreasonable to see like CeeDee Lamb or Amon-Ra have a big touchdown season. Like, both the Cowboys and Lions offense should be solid. And I also feel like I don't really want to be banking on A.J. Brown repeating his touchdown production because he could catch double digits again. But, I mean, he caught 44% of the Eagles' passing touchdowns. It's also not like he's playing with scrubs around him, right? Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, DeAndre Swift coming in. Like, I feel like he could also come back in the touchdown department, so I don't really want to have that skew my vision. I do think standard scoring is closer, but I'm still going to roll with Amon-Ra. But let me know what you guys think. I know I'm probably, a little away from consensus choosing Amon-Ra here. I feel like most people would probably take him as the 3rd guy. For me, I just feel like his production has been dinged by the injuries last season. I don't think that's something that's going to carry over, and he is someone I'm very high on heading into the 2023 season. But let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.